All right. So thanks everybody for joining us today. I know that this is a topic that's very relevant right now, and that just in terms of Nyles and Don joining us today, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and there's various events that are happening, and it's all the more relevant that we talk about some of the maybe professional challenges and different outlooks that come into the career field. So with that said, I have Don Valdez and Nyles Thorne here with me, and we're going to talk about some of the issues that affect military veterans, and also what that means, from a professional perspective, as you go through your career, how you might interact with military veterans within the professional field. I mean, it comes right down to it. They're just regular people like you and I. And then also the future outlook for that as it relates to hiring in the future, how it might relate to the different high growth opportunities that are available, in a bunch of different fields, and how maybe for military members coming out of the service, how they can bridge the gap to the civilian field, and how we can make that better. And it's getting better every day. So with that, I'm going to start by first telling a story here. And this is a little bit about my own family and their history as it relates to this. And this is completely off the cuff. Don and Nyles haven't seen this yet, so I'm going to get their reaction too. So that being said, also just want to give a disclaimer that opinions expressed in here do not represent those of any affiliated entities or companies that we work with. So this is just us off the cuff. All right. So just wanted to tell a little bit story about my family, and for my both my grandpas, basically, they were in some branch of the military, and both sides of my family have been involved from some type of standpoint that way. And my mom was actually born on an Air Force base in Amarillo, Texas. I don't believe it's there anymore, but they moved around a lot, and I think that there's something about that and the generation that both of my grandfathers were born into, that people continue to look back on, and it's also still relevant to a lot of the things going on today. So you had the Great Recession about 10 years ago. You have what's happening in a similar aspect financially with COVID today. And so with the Great Depression era, there was a lot of tumultuous things going on in the country. And my paternal grandpa was also in the Army. So he grew up in the Depression, as did my maternal grandfather. And that was an era where you just kind of did what you had to do to get by. And so he was born to a Scottish and Irish parents. And basically, they, at that time, there was like this kind of shakeup going on with the medical field. And, you didn't really have the kind of technology that they have now. And so, people might have not made it until, a certain age. And unfortunately, both of his parents didn't. And he was orphaned at a young age. And I guess for about 1 or 2 years, he was in an orphanage, and he was eventually adopted by a family called the Knutsons, and they raised him up until, he was ready to kind of go out into the world. But during that time, building up to before and after his joining the service, he did a lot of things that, were just very, maybe considered menial labor. He caned chairs in his basement. He had a woodworking shop down there. He also made candles, and basically did what he had to get by. And so when the opportunity to join the service came around, as a lot of people did in his generation, he was very glad to sign up, and it was for a good cause that way. And so he was in the Army for quite some time. And this is actually a draft card here. So he was in the Hawaiian department, and I'll get into a little bit why that's relevant in just a second. But he was stationed at various places around the country, and he worked with a very specific branch of the military. That's actually his group photo there, where I've highlighted him. And that was the US Signal Corps. So the US Signal Corps plays an interesting relevance to media in that as it started out, maybe communications back then consisted of couriers, before the dawn of radio and TV, and just general communications between units and bases and things of that nature. But with the Signal Corps, they were basically on the front lines of developing technologies, which the telephone had come out maybe a couple decades before that. Radio was starting to become a big thing, and eventually this evolved into other areas. But with the Signal Corps, they actually worked with a group called the Navajo Code Talkers. And the Navajo Code Talkers were a very crucial part of World War II. And they were basically a group of Navajo Native Americans that had a language that basically nobody knew around the world, and only they knew it. So that came into a great amount of relevance when it came to Morse code, and basically communicating between different parts of the world. And their code was unbreakable. So it was basically like encrypting the signal when they'd send out communications. And that meant the US signals were unbreakable. And there's another guy that plays into this. You guys may have heard of him, Alan Turing, and he was really pivotal within that. There's actually a movie about him called The Imitation Game, and the amount that he was able to achieve within his lifetime was pretty nuts. So he actually had made the groundwork for not just encryption and radio communications, but he'd actually laid the groundwork for some of the first computers. And a lot of people in the computer field actually look back on him nowadays, and he's basically considered a legend within that, in that he was making very rudimentary computers at that time, but he actually formed an unbreakable code that they could communicate with, in addition to the Navajo Code Talker stuff. And in addition to that, you had the signals and the access that needed to be broken. And because he was an expert cryptologist, he actually was able to crack those codes. And that was a determining factor in actually finding out Axis positions, and in the US winning World War II and D-Day coming about. So conversation for later, definitely look these guys up, check them out. And here's an actual radiogram that I had given to me by my grandmother, where the community or the family actually communicated with my grandpa. And this was, you could consider it like an email from back in that day. And, that was something that, was how you communicated back then. So it's an interesting artifact of that era. And after he got out of the Army, he ended up working for the Bell Corporation. Many of you right now may know that as at&t, and it got broken up into multiple parts, but that was basically the telecommunications company of that era. And so essentially, there's a root there. I realized later on that my dad had gotten into ham radio and computers, and that was by the influence of my grandfather there. So my grandfather actually worked for Bell his entire life. retired on a pension, which, you know, may not be happening nowadays. But you know, that was something where, you know, there's kind of a direct route there into, you know, what media has become these days, and you know, how that evolution has taken place. And he eventually got married, you know, had a very long life. And then my grandmother was also a graphic designer, and that related to advertising back in the day as well. And she's the one that shared a lot of this stuff with me. And she is still going strong, 94 years old. She enjoys Guinness a lot. And you know, that's just a really good groundwork to maybe start off the conversation here. So I think, you know, how it relates to media these days, Nyles and Don have a lot to say, and I'm going to admit some more folks here as well. So with that, I will pass it over to Nyles to tell us a little bit about, you know, how he grew up and, you know, how he got to where he is today.
And thank you, Adam, for your story, and thank you for the introduction. So first and foremost, we'll say good afternoon. How's everyone doing today? Hope everyone's doing well and safe, especially in these times. Again, as Adam said, I'm Nyles Thorne. I'm an associate of addressable strategy at Matterkind. So I'm just going to give you guys just a little quick rundown of my personal life, how I grew up, and kind of some of the events that came to be for today. So as it goes for anyone, the upbringing kind of dictates what their kind of person would be like in the future. My mom and dad were, you can say they're strict yet fair. They did believe and have the mentality of being kind and courteous and professional to everyone you always meet. But at the same time, if you're backed into a corner, be prepared to take action. Taking some of those words, I wanted to create like a set of values and as like a guideline for me to run through my life. So I can honestly say when I was a little kid, I was a little bit on the bigger side. Even when I was born at my mom said, told me like 10 pounds, something ounces. So yeah, I was a big boy. And even as going through elementary school, I remember some kids called me and this was kind of funny, a chocolate Pillsbury Doughboy. I can't make that up, and kids are just mean today. So with that, my kind of bigger weight stayed with me from elementary school, into middle school, and even coming up just right before high school. So at this era, we're in 2000. At this point, I'm actually starting to lose weight. I started getting more involved with sports, you know, football, track, cross country, you name it. I was just trying to do it all. And the thing was at this time, the military actually was catching my eye a little bit. Growing up around Red Bank in Tinton Falls, New Jersey, I was right next to the Fort Monmouth Naval Weapons Station Earl. So I actually had like a bunch of friends who were the sons and daughters of like servicemen and women throughout the area. So I guess we all can say this is the events of September 11th and everything that transpired after that was life-altering, life-changing for the United States and for the world. It was actually kind of at that moment is where I said, I want to join the military. Going into furthermore into high school, in the 2002, 2003, 2004, we had recruiters coming to my high school, guys, Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, Navy. But the one thing was the Marine Corps always stood out. I only heard stories about them. I saw videos, they were always the first to fight. They were the nation's 911 call. So it was at that moment in time, my senior year, I told my mom, like, hey, I want to become a Marine. And if you can imagine her facial expression, her eyes opened up and her mouth dropped and was like, no, you're not. So with that, it was fast forward 2006, and I still remember those words, June 29th, 2006. Joe instructor comes on my bus. Congratulations, you made a courageous decision to become a United States Marine. Now get off my bus. He said a bunch of things that I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it brand safe for this.
Keep
for
it
this
brand
section.
safe.
So with this, I completed boot camp, School of Infantry, eventually joining my unit. And upon checking in and joining my unit at the time was actually deployed as augments in the operation of Fallujah, Iraq. And my first sergeant was like, hey, guess what? These guys are over there. You're going to be leaving in the next possible year. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. So with that, I spent about a year. We were going to trainings and courses, different types of schools, to where eventually in 2008 we landed on the ground in Iraq, where our unit kind of split up a little bit everywhere, and my particular portion of the unit ended up in what's it called, like Akashat, which was only about 15 clicks away from the Iraq-Syrian border. We did our mission. We did everything we achieved. We all came home safe. Now this is fast forwarding into 2009, with us making it back safe. A little bit of an interest caught me in the medical field. It was like emergency trauma care, which was what our corpsmen were training us, combat life-saving course, which is just basically the military version of our 911 system. So I wanted to continue this. I came home eventually and I became an EMT, got my license. I started working for a bunch of different organizations. Some were volunteer EMS, some were on paid squads, some were with the hospitals. And so now going into the 2013 era, I'm basically transitioning out of the Marine Corps. I'm still an EMT working, and also, I enrolled into the School of Rutgers. So go RU, go Jersey, black and scarlet, all day, every day. So at one point, if you can imagine, I thought I was gonna, become a doctor. I was taking courses, I was studying for the MCAT test, I was doing pre-med requisites, and for some reason, literally along the way, I said, maybe this isn't for me. I know, and throughout this time frame, my degree changed about 2 or 3 times. I kind of then found a passion for just like human development and human interaction, and wanted to know a little more about like this disease prevention. So I stayed along the path of public health and sociology, and stayed with that. So coming up to now, it would be a year, about 2 years actually, before graduating from Rutgers. My friend and colleague Don Valdez, he kind of introduced me to this digital advertising world that he's been in for a number of years, trying to tell me, like, hey man, why don't you try and get into programmatic? And I was like, what is that? Like, that makes no sense to me. It was even at the almost coming up to my senior year, he was able to get me a marketing internship. He showed me a brief, like kind of a little bit what DSP was, impressions, IO, that kind of gave me a certain little spark to where I want to get in this industry and I want to do anything I can, even though my degrees might not correlate to it. I'm driven to do whatever it takes to get that. And kind of a little bit from there, I'm just gonna stop right there, and how we got into programmatic will be for our next session.
Great. So do we want to pass over to Don?
Sure. What's going on, everybody? I hope you all are safe from wherever you're tuning in. It's nice to be here. Thanks for Adam and Nyles for putting this together. I think one of the most important things with this type of discourse and discussion is that outside of Nyles's and my experience as veterans, is that at the core, with everything going on in our country, is that we're not exactly the same, but at the same time, we do have similar experiences, right? So with Nyles talking about how he was raised, great family, flip-flopping majors, path that he chose to take didn't exactly take him to where he thought he was going to be. All of us at the core, outside of this veteran thing, we've gone through similar things, right? And then so I think that's important before we get specific on the veteran part. Whereas, like, if anyone was outside of media and not a veteran, just just going through life, like I think Nyles and I are examples where, again, outside of the veteran thing, you guys could end up doing what we end up doing. And I think for the topic at hand with being veterans, to also have our our siblings, our sisters, and our brothers who've put on the uniform, that Nyles and I are also examples that whatever type of experience that you've had in the last 2 decades, you can do whatever you put your mind to. And we are examples of cracking into the high growth industries, where we're not necessarily in the LEO, and we're not in law enforcement, and we're not first responders, we're not fire fighters. Awesome career paths, and we have Nyles and I have lots of friends that do that. But we ended up here. So anyone who's watching this who's not in an industry, I hope that you take from this that it is possible, like what we're doing. So with that said, my upbringing, I was raised by by a single mother and my grandmother around Jersey City for about 5 to 6 years of my life. My mother continually working, breaking her neck. She was a nurse at the time, was a nurse for a good couple of decades, working overtime. So a lot of time was spent with my grandmother. And then by kindergarten, first grade, she moved us down to central New Jersey, Somerset, Franklin Township represent. And outside of that, my mom and my grandma are 2 of my biggest heroes, very strong, independent women. I'm not just saying that like just to put out respect for very strong women, but like they taught me that you as much as adversity that you face, you can always overcome it. And especially seeing these strong women go through life and making everything work. My mom, breast cancer survivor 2 times, and she's still trucking along. Nyles knows her, like a very, very active woman. Very blessed to have her in my life. And Mom, I apologize again for being a terrible kid. Outside of that, our family, like my cousins, my aunts, uncles, we're based at the East Coast. Very great role models. A lot of great people to look up to as examples. Whether my family members are younger than me, older than me, definitely blessed to have good structure and good environment around me. They're doing great things. A bunch of them are in the medical field, if you could believe that. A bunch of them are like lawyers. In advertising as well. I got exposure to advertising because one of my older cousins, about a decade older than me, broke into the industry. And by the time I was approaching college, that's when I'd like to say the smarter half of my family, half of them moved to the West Coast, right? And then so there's a little portion of us on the East Coast still. My formal education, a little bit reversed than Nyles. From high school, I went straight into college. So private school all my life, and thankfully my mom, like I said, like worked hard to keep me in private school. And then I went to Rutgers University. Was a teak there, did fraternity guy things at Rutgers. Ended up studying political science. And one of the reasons why I ended up joining the military is because I sort of misspent my time still hanging out at the frat house, extended amount of time. So I needed to get my situation straightened out. So that's one of the reasons why I ended up joining the military in 2005. Outside of that, we can talk about more specific things while we go through questions that Adam has for us. The other formal education I do have, I got my MBA from a small school in New York City, Keller Grad School of Management, in 2011, a couple of years after I got back from Iraq. But outside of that, like, I'm ready to kick off discussion with whatever question Adam has and whatever question you guys have.
Absolutely. And we will have Q&A towards the end of this, probably about 15 minutes from now. But just wanted to ask a couple of questions to Don and Nyles, around that. And thank you both. That was awesome, just in terms of how much you're willing to let out there. And I think that, we try to make this a very candid conversation, very organic. So the first one here is, you guys talked a little bit about Rutgers, and I think this is probably one of the prime things on the mind of other, people that think about what veterans go through in the professional field, and also veterans themselves. So was it weird to start school in parts, or to start it late? And what's your experience with that?
Mr. Nyles.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a little bit of a hit on this one for this. Yeah, so me coming into Rutgers, in my later years, it was a little bit of an experience. Actually, it was a lot of experience. So the military, you go through boot camp training, and your unit, you have this training and mentality. Like when you wake up in the morning, you put your bed together, you put on your clothes or your uniform, whatever. You set everything all up around your room. You do certain things to keep your area like clean, neat, and ready to go. So moving into Rutgers, and I kind of moved in just at a whim. I saw like a Craigslist ad for like, a roommate needed. I kind of walked into my first house and I was like, oh, wow, I did not know trash can be piled that high without falling. That is awesome. So it was at that, and just seeing just the mentality of students, how, and not to bash them, but it's different because I guess I was used to like already taking care of myself. A lot of these students have trouble trying to distinguish having to pay rent and utilities, or wanting to spend money on beer, or complaining about how, they're tired because they didn't get coffee or something. And I'm like, well, I've been up since 4:30 in the morning. Well, what's good? So, it was a different experience, but it is what it is. You just kind of like adjust to it. And you bring I kind of was bringing some of my habits and teaching others. So a lot of them actually started, my roommates started participating with me. When I would clean, they would clean, take out the trash, do the dishes, all that. And I've actually had some of the roommates hit me up later on and say, hey, you know what, Nyles, thank you for actually helping me begin that, and actually help them out later on in their life with some of their family or personal issues.
Yeah, with my experience, like I was saying, is I did it reverse than Nyles, right? Like I went to high school, didn't enlist right after high school. I enlisted after going to college. So the disgusting people that Nyles are talking about, I was one of those guys. So I could definitely empathize with the people who did not have the very rigid instruction that we received in the Marine Corps. Where I did go to, where it was a sort of a culture shock for me, was going to grad school when Nyles and I came back from Iraq. After I got my bachelor's, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, I thought I was done with school. I was just like, okay, I'm going to join the Marines and eventually get a career somewhere. I didn't foresee myself going back to school, but ended up in grad school, and I would say I was the first iteration of the post 9/11 GI Bill. And the experience of, coming back from a deployment and seeing what people prioritize and, what people got frazzled over. It was a tough adjustment for me. I'm not gonna be dishonest about that. I definitely had very naive expectations about how other people should act. And I definitely felt entitled after I came back home the first time in 2009. But I mean, after the adjustment period before I graduated in 2011, so like it took about like a year till, you know, I got a hold of myself and realized, like, listen, like I can control my mindset, and if I have a positive, you know, influence on other people and how they act and how they view the world, and I could also learn from them, soften up a little bit. That was, you know, that was my transitional experience back in 2009. I'm not sure if you knew this, Adam, but like within the last 2.5 years, I also got called back to active duty, and I'm pretty sure you probably have questions about that. But I would say going back to active duty in the last 2-3 years and coming back home from Afghanistan wasn't too much of a culture shock, just because I already went through it a couple times. I think it was important for me this most recent time to make sure that my younger guys, you know, the younger colleagues, wasn't too much of a shock for them. So yeah, that like you know, my initial one, it wasn't a terrible transition, but it was challenging.
Sure. So in fact, let's talk about that a little bit. And in terms of your deployments, you know, maybe for both of you, have you felt that that's been disruptive to your professional experience? Do you feel like it's been nice to have that variety and to kind of, you know, have a go-between there? What's your take on it, and how do you feel about it?
Nyles, you want to go first?
Sure. So yeah, I guess you could say it was a little bit of a, again, it was a little bit of a shock. It was like just taking kind of everything that we've learned from just the military and being overseas and trying to apply it home. But at the same time, you can't take that. That's two different environments you're trying to try to have a cohesion for. So, you know, I guess to say, honestly, like, I was used to doing things like, hey, if someone told me to do something, I got it done right away. And I can say that, yes, I honestly started getting agitated when someone else didn't take didn't take their full 100% effort in doing it, or it took them forever. So yeah, that was a little bit of a shock to me for that. And I don't know what to say, like, it's also learning everything we've done over there and just trying to implement it for a professional life. Carry yourself out in a certain way, 24/7. I guess you could say is one of the things that we've always been told, you're a Marine 24/7 in and out the uniform. So you got to carry yourself always in a professional manner, no matter what. That kind of relates to what's going on today. Everything you do today can be seen with a camera or a phone. So we do kind of have to be careful what we say, how we act, because we all know that can end up on mainstream media within a matter of seconds. So I guess I don't know how to really properly put together. It's just there were some differences in environments, and you know, you can't force what you have experienced onto others. And then at the same time, I think other people, civilians, whatever, should take maybe just like, you know, a step in the direction to say, I want to learn what these guys have experienced, and maybe they can use that for better on their side.
I would like to point out that when Nyles and I joined the military, MySpace was the huge thing before Facebook. That's how old we are.
MySpace days.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, if anyone's just tuning in, Nyles and I, our perspective is coming from the Marine Corps Reserve Infantry perspective, right? We weren't in the fleet full time, but I think like for me, like I ended up serving 15 years. I think total active duty time was about like 4 to 5 years, something like that. The first time that Nyles and I went overseas was Mongolia. It was 2007, right?
Yep.
That was like my experience then. I was a project manager at Verizon, and Verizon was really great. with adjusting to us being gone for a couple months. So that was my first experience with like telling an employer like, hey, I gotta go. I gotta go help train some troops out in Mongolia. That was super interesting. So that was pleasant. When we went to Iraq, that was at the tail end of being at Verizon. Um, that was that wasn't rough at all. Like I actually didn't experience anything out of the ordinary. Verizon didn't give me trouble at all. So that was pretty pleasant. What was interesting is that in 2010, I had to go to an exercise in the Arctic Circle. I think Vice Media did a documentary on it, Operation Cold Response in Norway. And I was in grad school around then. I did not expect this from an academic establishment saying like, hey, I gotta go for a couple months. They let me take open book midterms. They let me hand in my finals early. And I will tell you this much, based on the stories that I've heard, that is not normally the case. I was blessed for that. Telling an employer that I had to go to Morocco for a month or two, that wasn't terrible. The one that was, I think, a shock was the most recent one. Was Afghanistan, because I think we were working at Engine together, right, Adam?
Yep.
Yeah, we were working at Engine together. Careers booming. Had a great team. I love that team around that time. And then all of a sudden you get the notice like, hey, like within a couple months, you're going to Afghanistan. And like, honestly, being in New York City, living in our bubble, it's just like, there's still a war going on. And, like still being actively part of a reserve unit, you didn't think that your number was going to get called. It's not that you're scared or anything. It's just that so unexpected that out of all the units that they could have called, it just happened to be the one I was part of. So that was a little disruptive because a lot in the industry changed when I was gone. There's the stuff with seismic going down, GDPR, the stuff with going like everything going with the government and stuff, and to come back home, especially a lot of you guys went through transition, so like a lot of the familiar faces that I was used to, definitely different environments. So I think, and by the way, I put it out there, Engine and EMX, they were very great with accommodating that transition. So I don't think my experience was disruptive in a sense that a company caused that discomfort. It just happened and I there's a lot of situations where it's not like that for other people. But more so, it was there's just the changing in culture, and time is not going to stop for you just because you're doing another thing overseas. Remember, Nyles, when before we left for Iraq, YouTube was barely a thing, right? So we left for Iraq the fall of 2008. By the time we came back in spring 2009, Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber, YouTube, everyone had a smartphone. My brain almost
that blew my mind.
exploded. Like I was just like, oh my goodness.
We still had CD players, man, and I was like, what is this iPod thing?
Yeah, like Adam, so like that question just made me remember a lot of things where it's just like not even like school, just like coming back home and only being gone for like less than just like shy of a year, and things have changed, and it's not just like your interactions with your family members or your friends, but it's just the culture. Like time is not going to stop just because you're off doing one thing. So that's one thing I learned.
Absolutely. And out of curiosity, how did you both break into advertising? You touched a little bit on that, but it would be interesting to hear your kind of progression through media. And maybe people might think that's a rarity, but you may also know some other veterans working in that field as well.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this a little bit before in my very beginning of my story. So it's going back in the 2015-16 era. you know, I was about to be graduating Rutgers in the next year or so. And, you know, I've met up with, you know, Don and I always met up at Rutgers for just to hang out, just to get beers, whatever. And he was just telling me about the digital ad space that he works in. And I just never understood it. So I never really kind of bothered to ask him until one day, like he kind of gave me like a quick explanation. He basically said this, hey, you see those ads on your phone, or whatever, or on your laptop? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, I'm more or less the reason why you get it. I'm like, what? And I was like, and I don't want that, man. And it's like, no, it's. He's like, telling me it's not as simple as you think. To me, I always thought like it was, oh, you just input something in Excel and just send it off. And he was telling me the intricacies of the process of like everything from like the IO, RFPs, and talking to partners and the DSPs. And for some reason, that just caught my interest. And I just wanted to find out like a little bit more. I wasn't like too enthusiastic about it. I was like, I'm willing to give this a little bit of a try. And it was coming around to then graduating and wanting to go more for this, where after my marketing internship that Don was able to get me, I said, hey man, like I kind of want to get into this more. So it was a little bit of everything that I was trying to do to get in this industry. I was subscribing to Adweek, trying to go. I went to Condé. The Condé Nast had some articles back then describing what programmatic was. I was trying to pick up on any books I could. So it was me working my EMT shifts of anywhere from 8, 12, 16 hours and just picking up a book and just reading 3 or 4 pages, writing down some notes, trying to then understand it, and then asking around like, hey, what does this mean? What does this term mean? How do you imply this? And from that, you know, thanks to Don and wanting to sit down with me and just like review everything programmatic, I kind of just went forward and said, you know what, I'm looking to give this a shot. I want to take an opportunity just to get in the industry. And I guess you can say that was rough. So it was only I mean, I thank you that it was only happening for about a year and a half, year and a half. But man, it was, I think I did 33 in-person interviews in the city, taking multiple days off, in which as an EMT, sadly to say, we don't get paid the best amount of money, working multiple shifts before and even after interview. I think I submitted 215 resumes. Some of those were those easy LinkedIn submit, and some of those were those ones where like, hey, you have to fill out every single line manually and would not let you copy and paste. So fast forwarding, it's 2018, all these interviews and rejected resumes. I kind of was like, man, I'm tired of it. Like I don't give up or anything, but man, it was just kind of like, wow, what am I doing? So honestly, it was through some mutual friends who were working at, well, we are now rebranded as Matterkind, but it was Cadron at the moment, who said, hey, Nyles, there's a position that's open up as a coordinator at Cadron. Would you like a possible interview for it? And I'm like, sure, why not? I don't think it's probably not gonna even go forward, whatever. Like I was excited for the interview, like I was preparing myself, but it was after so many letdowns, it kind of like, you wonder like, is this even worth it? Came into the building, met with my team through multiple, interviewing with multiple people, some managers and ADs, and to tell you the truth, the world was different to me. When I thought of as a corporate world, I thought of originally the cubicle 5x5, some guy in a suit yelling at you, and that was it. You know, seeing Cadron at the time was like, wow, people here are dressed like, you know, business casual or just regular clothes. Everyone's friendly, everyone's nice, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. But yeah, even going through the interview process, I still remember that phone call. I was driving home. I actually had a bad call where someone that I actually had personally started to get attached to in terms of being like a patient who I've always seen, did sadly say expired that day. I was not really feeling too well. And I got a phone call, from the IPG talent acquisition, like, hey, is this Nyles? And I guess, like, hey, we've talked to the team, they said they loved you and they'd like to make an offer. And I was like, oh, for real? I was in my car, like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, like I literally, I could say I almost crashed my car. And I was like, that turned my wheel. All of a sudden, like, oh, crap. But yeah, that was just my first big break. Officially getting like into programmatic. And again, we could talk about this later on, but like it was there from just trying to learn everything. And I admittedly say I had some rough times trying to like understand the course material or just like the way things were working, because it was just completely different environment from being, again, military, EMS, and being non-corporate. But yeah, getting into the show, I'd like to thank, another shout out, to thank Don, obviously, initially for getting me in. I'm going to thank all the team members at Matterkind now who were able to put up with me. And, anyone that knows me, I eat the worst food and drink the most amount of Red Bulls and energy drinks that they could probably put down, if I make a small horse go to sleep. But thank you guys just for taking care of me, showing the knowledge, and helping me instill this knowledge into others, in which I would like to eventually talk about the initiative that we have at Matterkind.
Great. Cool. So, and we'll probably get into that right after this last question, and then we will go to Q&A. So this is obviously an important one. Obviously, you guys ended up in media. What are other veterans doing professionally now that they've gotten out of the service?
I mean, with the job that Nyles and I had in the Marine Corps, right? Like we're infantry. So a lot of our friends ended up being police officers, agents in 3-letter agencies, firefighters. Firefighters always get joked around with just because everyone wants to be fired. No one hates firefighters, so we always give them a hard time. And then there are quite a few that are doing corporate America jobs, right? Like my best friend during my Afghanistan deployment, he works at data miner. There are quite a few of the guys that were in my platoon also in programmatic now. Once we got back from Afghanistan, it's a good variety of careers based on my perception, which I'm very proud about. I'm so you can talk about like the awards or like the commendations that like all of us got or whatever, but like what I'm mostly proud about are the American lives that these guys are leading, no matter what type of profession. So it wasn't like 90% of us ended up on Wall Street, right? Like it's a mixed bag, man. So we're all out there. It's a Project Mayhem.
Love it. Nyles?
Yeah, with that, yeah, like what Don said is that every one of us is different. We all pursue like a different career path. And it's just crazy how, as like military veterans, like, I mean, I guess the civilians, you could say, they have their friends, whatever, and they can always get together. But military vets, we have a bond, and where no matter what industry or job field that we might go towards, no matter where we end up in life, I guess you could say we always seem to want to come together. It might be just meeting up for food, getting a drink or so, or just meeting up somewhere, just talking. And so with that, what Don says is like, I guess as vets, we always want to take care of each other, no matter what. And so when I first came to, and again, reiteration is, it was Cadreon first. It was through actually some other mutual friends who were also vets in the industry. We were trying to implement a plan to say like, we want like, hey, we're veterans. we got into this industry, what can we do to get others? This was like, it was a little bit of back and forth trying to just get information from up and down the chains of IPG to say how many veterans are actually in the industry or in are not building our IPG. And at the moment, I think it was 15 vets out of thousands and thousands and thousands of employees, which was like, wow, okay, why isn't there more? And that question has been brought up multiple times and there was really no answer. So it was through some efforts internally within, again, this was carried on at the time, and other associates who were in the industry, where he said, hey, let's build something that we can help out each other, bring more veterans in the industry, bring more veterans into, again, carry on at the time. So with that, I kind of want to give like a little bit of introduction for this. So I'm proud to say through multiple efforts, through multiple meetings, feedback, and a lot of setbacks and ups and downs, at Matterkind, we are now officially have started the group of Frontline for Veterans in Media. With this, we're trying to have a little bit of like a sphere of influence where the effort's gonna be developing here at Matterkind, but then we wanna take this and expand this even further. We wanna keep going with this into Kinesso. We want to go bring this even bigger and make it go through IPG. We wanna actually even make this even bigger to where this could be emulated in the digital media ad space. So this is gonna be like a multi-level approach for this initiative. It's going to be where we're not trying to go out there and like, oh, we're just going to hire vets and get them in. Like, no, we're trying to do a full, you can say a full funnel approach. It's creating a
from bottom funnel, from top funnel to bottom funnel. Right?
Oh man, so we're trying to create a network for veterans and all those who actually love to support it. We're trying to arrange a communication network with other industries who maybe have some type of veteran initiative, and we get STEM ideas from each other. Like, hey, how can we help them grow? How can you help us grow? Also, a big portion of this, in my mind, is going to be to educate and establish a relationship between to say who is a veteran and what is the corporate world. So for veterans, it's educating them what is the corporate world, how can they translate those military skills into the professional industry, and it's also giving education to the civilians and like the HR talent acquisition and general employees to say what is a veteran and who are they and what are they like. And I truly do believe that all these efforts combined to one can stem to something so big that, right now it's small, but 4 or 5 years from now, this could be something that's implemented not only across my company, my industry, but throughout every business sector that it possibly is.
And I'm pretty excited about follow-on conversations that we'll have, just because it just makes sense, particularly with not just like, the motivation and discipline and stuff like that, but when you get to the root of like the concepts that we're taught, like operationally, particularly with targets, right? We're taught about target packages and how to look for certain things and what goes against like the baseline, or what to look for with geography and how that translates over into media, just not in that military way. We still talk about targets. So pretty excited about all this stuff.
Love it. Yeah, and I just wanted to quick highlight 2 other organizations here. And after that, anybody with questions, please type those in the chat right now. We'll start loading those up. And then after I'm finished with this, we can ask verbal questions as well. Feel too shy to do that, please ask them in the chat. So this is an organization, Bunker Labs, that I found pretty unique. Just wanted to give them a shout out as well. No official affiliation, but they're doing some pretty unique stuff around the country in giving veterans access to some of the startup culture and, the thriving tech sector that's, been spread across the country. And they have meetups in various cities. They have support programs. They have a startup incubator. So really a lot of stuff that way. And then the last one here is called Echelon Front. And I believe some other ad tech companies out there have worked with them. Video Amp comes to mind. But basically, they help to set up different workshops for leadership training. It's a group of Navy SEALs, and they basically kind of trying to translate some of that strategy, how it relates to leadership. They got a lot of great material here, resources, books. They even have a podcast you can listen to. So it's some pretty interesting stuff. And, so that's stuff to check out as well. But with that, I'm going to jump back in here and we might try to answer some questions. So with that said, anybody have any questions? Please shoot those out. Okay, we'll start with one from Victor Ramos here. Question for Don. Since you went back to Afghanistan for several months, and since a lot can happen in the industry in several months, how did you stay up to date on the industry for your eventual return?
Okay. So with where I was at in Afghanistan, and what was very different than going to a combat zone a decade ago, was that in Afghanistan they had Wi-Fi, if you can believe that or not. So with access to Wi-Fi and always being in contact with my team on WhatsApp, and keeping up to date on like Adage and having just the Google alerts, that's how I was up to date. And plus, once I came back stateside around last April, I started hitting a bunch of you guys up and was like, hey, what's going on with this, and this? A lot to take in, and there's still a lot to take in right now. With Google, like if Google announced that they were sunsetting the third-party cookie, and Facebook Audience Network shut down, and Apple IDFA happened while I was overseas, I would lose my mind. Thankfully, I'm here for that. Work with everyone on that, but that's how I kept in touch. The base I was operating out of, it had Wi-Fi.
Lucky you.
Yeah, right. That's what I was trying to explain to this Afghan group versus Iraq. It's just like internet, you got to go get a number for that. And I'm pretty sure the older guys can be like, you guys had internet? Like it always starts down that chain.
Love it. We'll maybe take one or two more questions from the audience here. So from Jack Lopez, what's the most important lesson or quality you learned or earned from your experience in the Marine Corps that you've taken and used in your current careers? And that's to both of you.
Okay, I'll take a little bit of a hit on that. I guess all I could say is be open-minded to any and all suggestions and possibilities. And I say that and that can be used in a business sense, is I guess when you are in the Marines, the thing is everyone is considered a leader. Even though there is a chain, there's a chain of command, sergeant, staff sergeant, whatever, everyone is basically supposed to be more or less be able to think individually, but thinking individually, but being able to come together as a group for to accomplish a task and goal. So you got to be willing to look and listen at other people's perspectives to accomplish that goal. There isn't anything of, because I've been in this title for this long, that it should be done my way. It should be like, hey, you know what? Let's take the top level experience, let's take someone at the bottom, and let's combine it all to one. So it's just being able, you want to listen to everyone's mind and concept, because remember, your way of thinking, or even a couple other people's way of thinking, might be wrong, but it could be an individual outside that group that could be correcting to accomplish something or to bring an answer. So to me, just be open-minded, be willing to listen to everyone's thoughts and processes. You know, that's it for my terms of perspective.
I would say, like, to drill down even to be like in order to be open-minded, you'd also have to be able to know how to communicate, right? Um, in the military, outside of like the the traditional hierarchy, the great operating units are the ones who are able to communicate respectfully, very refined, very concise. Like, the communication is not always going to be implicit. That's a buzzword in the military, but the really great operating units take time in building that cohesion. So I would say that the most important thing is the ability to communicate, right? So why that translates over into the civilian world is because the civilian world, right? Like, if you're out of touch with the culture in your office because you don't communicate, it's going to be a toxic work environment. I've been part of that because people don't communicate. They barely say two sentences to each other, or they'll say things one way and then say a different thing once you turn around and whatnot. So I think outside of being open-minded with what Nyles talked about, it's being able to just communicate with your colleagues is what I got from the military.
Love it. And we got two more questions here. One is from your favorite guy, Frank Mishak here. Since you're both Scarlet Knights, are you still connected with Rutgers at all? ROTC, recruiting, etc.?
A little bit. Sorry to say, I kind of stemmed away from it a little bit. I was actually in contact with a lot of guys who were still at the veteran group that we had over there. There was a guy named Colonel Abe. I believe he transitioned to another career, or he actually retired from there. But yeah, it was just communicating just with the current veterans who were at the time attending Rutgers after we left. And I came down a few times now and again to just try to give like a little bit word of like encouragement, especially in the with some of those guys who were attending Rutgers. They were facing possible deployments to Afghanistan, and that was just to say, hey guys, remember, like I said before, you're in uniform, you represent the military, you represent being some of the best people in the United States, if not the world. So carry yourself out that way. When things get rough, things get tough, when things seem a little bit down the low, just remember you went through basically hell in order to put on that uniform, to wear that title, and just keep moving forward no matter what. And so I've talked with a few guys now and again, but I've kind of been a little bit out of touch, and I probably should just be going back out there to try to like say, hey guys, what's up? How you guys doing?
For an official capacity with Rutgers, I serve as an advisory board member on the CX program, customer experience program. Outside, informally, I suppose just keeping in touch with TEEX, Tau Kappa Epsilon, all the Rutgers alumni members, and the patrons of Stuff Your Face on Easton Ave. Love Stuff Your Face.
Nice shout outs there. So the last one here is from Mike Cairns. He says, internships are a traditional way into ad tech that's very viable. Is that viable for vets? If not, what kind of training might be out there, perhaps from some kind of bigger companies? Independent coursework? A guy I know at Ground Truth has great materials available on Udemy.
Yeah, I guess I could take an answer at this question. So with the initiative that we're starting at Matterkind with the Frontline for Veterans in Media, this was one of the things that we actually wanted to tackle. It was just kind of like just based off a little bit of my experience. Like, there wasn't exactly an actual like guide or an actual path to take. I kind of just had to figure things out myself, and I kind of saw myself how I struggled to get in. So we wanted to do the same thing for others by establishing this initiative. We wanted to be able to set forth like a place where not only veterans of our industry and our company could come together, but reaching out to others who are showing that like drive and that push to say, hey, they want to get in also media and tech, digital advertising, but they don't know how. So this with this initiative, we're just going to develop like a sort of a boot camp that's just helping them out with like a programmatic 101 courses, helping them out with developing their resume, their cover letter, how to actually formally conduct an interview, what to say, maybe even how to set up your professional LinkedIn profile. You know, we want to be able to cover all aspects in terms of hiring and just being a professional-minded individual. Because I guess you could also say, going into high school, even going to college, they don't really exactly prepare you for the real world. They don't really prepare you how to get a job. They just tell you, have your resume, go out to interview, and like that's it. And like there's so many other things that we're missing that I would love to hit on and just help more veterans get in the industry for.
I think to highlight with what Nyles' initiative, you know, what they got going on at Matterkind is that if you're going to have an internship for your organization, you would get the most bang for your buck if you already had some sort of onboarding process available to the veterans. So now talks about like, you know, 101 courses and, you know, resume writing stuff. A lot of the veterans, particularly with, you know, my friends coming out of like the fleet from active duty, a lot of the advice that they get are from someone who spent 20, 30 years in the military and is just, you know, that's their civilian job, is to tell these guys how to transition out of it when they didn't really go through what these young guys are going through. So I think in order for organizations or companies who are offering internships to veterans, definitely viable, but to take it a step further and make sure that you take at least 1 week, 2 weeks to you know, take the time to onboard and invest your time in coming up with programs, how the things that they learned in the military could be relatable to the job function at hand.
Great answer there. Great. So I think this is a good point to close it out, everybody. Thank you to Don and to Nyles for putting this on. Great stories. And that's really what we're going for. And good news for everybody. We're going to be holding a second one of these shortly. So stay tuned for that. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into how maybe military strategy plays into leadership strategy, business strategy, things like that, and get a little bit into you know, some of those aspects. So thanks, everybody. We'll have a recording going out after this as well. There's other materials we mentioned, and appreciate your support.
Take care, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Thank you, Adam.
Great job.
Thanks, Ma. Did you
Yeah,
get that on the
Nyles.
recording?
We're still recording.
Excellent.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Mom.
Peace, fellas. Great job, guys.
Talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, take care.